evening, everybody, and welcome along to this edition of Heroes and Icons. This is series 2 on a short, series of programs on heroes and icons of the 20th century that we feel, and these are mainly personal, but we feel here at Learn Media, that highlights the cultural, political, sporting life of the 20th century. And indeed, we finished the first series. There's 10 programs we did in series 1 on Heroes and Icons. They'll be available pretty soon. We're going to put them all together on one DVD for people to raise a few bob for charity, but we'll let you know about that in the immediate future. But for this edition and this program, this is episode 1 of series 2 of Heroes and Icons on Learn Media. And we have an email, info@learnmedia.tv, if you want to make any comments. And our YouTube channel is always available to view, Learn Media TV. So there you go. And all our programs are up on our YouTube channel. So feel free at any time indeed. Now, as you can see from the screen behind me, I'm sure many of you who will be watching this later on will recognize the wonderful, well, Mary Pickford, she was known as. That was her film name, her name that she took when she was beginning her career in film. Of course, Mary Pickford, she was a huge star in the silent era, but she crossed over to the talkies as well, as they were known as. And sometimes many of these artists and characters from that era, the turn of the century, from the 1890s to about 1930 or thereabouts, can be forgotten. Not alone can be forgotten for their craft and their art, but also for what they brought to the industry and the innovations they made and the sacrifices they made to do those things that we can enjoy today in modern film. Now, obviously, she was born Gladys Marie Smith. She was a pioneer of the American film industry, and there's no doubt about that. She founded Pickford Fairbanks Studio and United Artists, and we'll talk a bit more about that later on in the program. She was one of the 36 founding members of the Academy and Motion Pictures Arts and Scientists. And as we know, that's still in existence, and they're in charge of giving out the Academy Awards and making those awards every year in Hollywood. So it has endured, and it was a huge foresight on their behalf. Now, as I said, she was born in 1892 in Toronto, in Canada. Her father was John Charles Smith. He was the son of an English Methodist immigrants and worked in a variety of jobs. Her mother was Charlotte Hennessy, of Irish Catholic descent, and indeed she worked as a seamstress. Now, Hennessy is obviously associated with people who are looking at this program with whiskey. Now, I don't know, I was looking up thing. I don't know whether that her mother, Catherine Hennessy, would have been any relation to those Hennessy's. I don't know that. I couldn't find out where she actually came from after just doing a cursory, I suppose, look around different websites. I couldn't find that. There's scant information, but maybe in the next edition we may be able to put up. Maybe it might be a little project for yourselves who are looking in to to partake. But I was her mother was, as I said, a Hennessy, Catherine Hennessy from Ireland, but I don't know what part of Ireland she came from. But I would guess, if I had to hazard a guess, it would be the south of Ireland. Now, anyway, she was the first actress, indeed, to fly an airplane on film. That's our Mary Pickford. Now, of course, I mean, she worked with some of the most huge innovators in film in the industry, huge giants of the film industry, I suppose, at the turn of the century. She worked with, very lucky indeed to come around that time, indeed, that's herself, Mary Pickford. She worked with Cecil B Demille, Alan Dwan, James Kirkwood, Marshall Nealon, and Sidney Franklin, and many, many more. You can look up that yourself. We're just here to give a thumbnail for people to get an interest in her, you know, and that's her picture behind me there is with Douglas Fairbanks, who they built Pickfair that sumptuous house and grounds that she eventually lived in and died in as well, you know. But she died in the hospital. That's where she spent the last years of her life as well. But that's Douglas Fairbanks behind me there, in case people were wondering. Now, I suppose she was married to Owen Moore, and he was an Irish descent, Owen Moore. And indeed, I suppose it was a very challenging marriage for him, and that's not to excuse his appalling behavior, but for him, she was such a huge star. She was recognized by her image alone, all over the place, all over the world, really. You know, she had a meteoric rise, you know, in the industry. But he obviously had a huge problem with alcohol, and so much so that Mary Pickford divorced him in 1920, and she married Douglas Fairbanks in 1920. They became, I suppose, royalty of Hollywood. I mean, Fairbanks and Pickford, they were hugely influential, huge. I mean, you cannot, I was reading about it, you cannot imagine. I mean, today, you know, we can't imagine that at all, just removed from the 1912s, 13, 14, 1920 even. We couldn't imagine it because with the advent of the internet, Wi-Fi and all that, you must remember that people relied on telegram, people relied on the old style telephone, and they relied primarily on the radio for their news and newspapers. And so therefore, news was disseminated pretty slowly, but really these two people were absolutely in the news every week, with no doubt Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford. And indeed, as I said, she divorced Owen Moore in 1920 and married Douglas Fairbanks. And indeed, she was instrumental with Charlie Chaplin, D.W. Griffith, and Douglas Fairbanks. They formed United Artists themselves in 1920. So there you go. That was a huge innovation for. You must remember that nearly all of the films up to 1920s, 29, certainly, over half of them were written by women. And so women had a huge, I suppose, a huge network of support for themselves within the industry. I mean, Mary Pickford, I mean, she was not big, she was just 5 feet tall, which was small enough, really, you know, when you think about it. But she knew she was a fantastic businesswoman. She knew exactly, she was a very clear thinker. So she was never flummoxed by contracts or anything like that. And she always was pragmatic in that she would not be, what's the word I'm looking for, tied into huge, long contracts all through her career. And so much so that she wanted an awful lot of her own, I suppose, her own control over her artistic pursuits, I suppose, for want of a better word, you know. And she made her first stage appearance at the age of 7 in the Toronto Stock Company. And you can imagine, like, that was, you know, in 1900, roughly 1899, 1900, in Toronto Stock Company, where she was from, where they lived. And she made her New York debut in the Warrens of Virginia, which was a big sumptuous production at that time, in December 1907. So, I mean, she was 14 then, I think, around 13 or 14 when she made her New York debut. Now, the author of the Warrens of Virginia, David Blaskos, suggested, he came up with a name suggested she change her name. She was still going under Gladys Marie Smith, but so she changed her name. He suggested a name. He came up with the name Mary Pickford. And now, of course, that Mary Pickford is synonymous. When you mention Mary Pickford, I think even today, many people will recognize her photograph, will recognize the name. So you can imagine the influence she has even today, you know, this removed from her, the zenith of her career, so to speak, you know. And she had, as I said, a meteoric rise from an anonymous unknown, I suppose, to a star with her own production company by 1916. That was some achievement for her when you consider the background that she came from, which was really um, a very tough upbringing, a very tough, challenging time. But her mother was a strong woman as well, obviously, you know. And the lady with the ringlets, I'll have to read this a beautiful quotation in my book. I'll try to sum her up. The lady with the ringlets, with an expression of sweet sincerity and invincible innocence. I mean that she played in such films as, I mean, some of you will of a certain vintage, you know, some of you will not have seen some of her films because silent films. There used to be repeats way back in the 50s and 60s on the early days of television, but you don't see silent films anymore except some art house cinema. You might see a lot of Charlie Chaplin and Laurel and Hardy and Buster Keaton and Keystone Cops and those from that black and white era, but you don't see many of the Mary Pickfords and the other ones shown now, you know. I don't know whether they're available or not. They're on some channel. I didn't look that up. Maybe there is a vintage film channel. I don't know. There probably is. Anyway, she appeared in her film, her well-known films are Heart's Drift in 1914 and The Poor Little Rich Girl in 1917, Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm in 1917, Stella Maris in 1918, and Johanna in Lists in 1918. And, you know, all those films were box office successes. In fact, I mean, Mary Pickford was the first actor to get $1 million to make or fee to make a person to receive $1 million for her acting and for her filmmaking. So you can today now you obviously $1 million today. I mean, when you look at some of the astronomical fees that some actors are getting, actors and actresses like 20, 30, 40, 50 million, 100 million, you can imagine like the sensation that was at that time. And indeed, in 1917, the first national film company paid her $350,000 in 1917. I don't know what it'd be, about 1.4 million or something today's money. I'm just a rough estimate, but anyway, for three films, including the one she made in 1919, which was a very, very big success, and that was Daddy Longlegs was the name of that film, and it was hugely successful. And I say successful in the box office with people attending, obviously paying to see the film. So, I mean, they were lucrative for everybody, for all the makers, including the Mary Pickford herself, but for the production company and the distribution company and all the other people that are involved in filmmaking. So, you know, she won her Academy Award for her part in Coquette, Coquett. You can look up all these films and all these productions in your own time because we wouldn't have time to go through all the films individually and the cast and all of that and the plot lines because the program will be too long and you might want to be listening to me that long. But hopefully you'll listen to me long enough to get a pin picture of the wonderful Mary Pickford. Lear Media is the station, you and myself, Pat Barry, with Heroes and Icons, Series 2, Episode 1. And as I said, the Series 1 we completed was very successful. We had 10 episodes in Series 1, and we will make that available very, very soon with all the episodes on one DVD, and we'll be raising money for a charity. But more about that and on, and you can catch up on all these shows on our YouTube channel, Learn Media TV, our YouTube channel, and you'll find them all there. And all the titles are on all those programs. And please click on the red button on the right-hand side to subscribe to our channel. It's free of charge, and we're delighted with the subscription so far. Anyway, we're going to keep it going up and up, up and up. In 1933, after making her 194th film, Mary Pickford retired from the screen. Now, when I say she retired from the stream, she didn't retire, if you follow my drift. She retired 194 films she made by 1933 in 26 years, I think, in 26 years. So there you can see how busy she was. And now, as I said, in 1937, she married her Charles Buddy Rogers, an actor. She married Charles Buddy Rogers, and of course she was with him then until she passed away. So that's in 1937. Now her later years, well, I mean, she was a fantastic philanthropist, a great, I suppose, what I would contributor to charities that were dear to her heart, I suppose, charities that she promoted. And she set up many funds to help people in the industry as well, and promoted a number of very, very good causes, which you can read about about her. She just didn't, but let's say, just retire into her mansion and never again to be seen, although in later years, as I mentioned, she did. But now, I mean, her years were spent, and she was very. She was very, what's the word, a good business lady all her life. As you can see from the fees she commanded in her film career when she began way back in New York, I suppose was the beginning of her, when she changed her name to Mary Pickford for her debut at the age of 14, I think, after that. And she did think at that time that, yeah, I could make a living out of this, So her business acumen was excellent, and indeed she spent most of her or after retiring from the screen, not acting anymore, going around the States and going around the world, really, and I suppose living a little bit, because I mean, obviously, to make 194 films between what was it, 19, about 14, 15 years. I mean, it was a huge drain and a huge commitment, and on her time as well as her talent. So you could see why she decided to live a little bit, and so her later years, as I said, after that, when she retired in 1933, was spent mainly looking after her business interests. She had a film company, and as I said, she set up United Artists with Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks and D.W. Griffith. So, I mean, that was extremely successful. It was a fantastic company as well. I think it's still around today, United Artists. It's probably owned by one or two of those companies who own everything to do with the film industry. Anyway, she eventually became a recluse at Pickfair. That was the fantastic house, the mansion and grounds that herself and Douglas Fairbanks built. And of course, it's a huge estate. And so, as I said, it was built up by herself and Douglas Fairbanks. So was the picture up in the background here with him. And then, of course, in 1955, I mean, I think it's still available. In 1955, her autobiography was released, and that was Sunshine and Shadow. That was in 1955, it was published. And indeed, she received an honorary Oscar in 1976 for her long contribution to filmmaking, film production, and all the other things that go into making film, cinematography, and all that. Very successful indeed. And indeed, I suppose Heroes and Icons is a show with myself, Pat Barry, on their media. And indeed, this is our second series of Heroes and Icons. And this is episode 1 of the second series, and the first series will be available soon for you. And all the proceeds of that, we'll be selling it to raise money for charity. All the proceeds from that will go to 1 or 2 charities, which we will mention later on indeed. So on May the 29th, 1979, Mary Pickford died from a cerebral hemorrhage, which she suffered roughly a week previous, which necessitated her going to the hospital. So she suffered. And indeed, I was just looking at see where her grave is. She was buried in the Garden of Memory, it's called, for people who like this detail, if you're over in that part of the world, on the Forest Lawn Memorial Park Cemetery in Glendale, California. That was our Mary Pickford, and made it in 1979. So I mean, she was 84, or something like that, 84 when she passed away. But she had a good life. She had a fantastic trailblazer. She was one of the main innovators of modern film, in my opinion. She was her own lady all her life, and she was a very strong woman. And because you must remember from the era she came at the turn of the century, to blaze a trail like that, to gain respect very quickly at a very young age. And she was physically a small woman, just 5 feet tall, but really she was a fantastic businesswoman, a great actress. Her legacy is there for all to see. And as I said, her autobiography would be what I only came across it now myself. I don't physically have it. I just read some excerpts online from it, and I think I will buy it anyway. It's Sunshine and Shadow was her autobiography, published in 1955, and there you go, from Mary Pickford. It was our episode 1 of our Heroes and Icons from series 2 with myself, Pat Barry, on their media. And don't forget to press the red button to subscribe to our channel and tell all your friends about us. And as I said before, all our programs are available on our YouTube channel, Their Media TV, our YouTube channel, so you get them all there. But from this episode 1 of series 2 of Heroes and Icons, until we meet again, take care and God bless.